I want to talk to you today about how to get along with people who are hard to get along with, how to get along with difficult people, and it's particularly how to deal with difficult people in your group. It is my observation that in church world, we have an above average cross-section of difficult people. And the reason is pretty simple. We're pretty nice to them. And so they tend to hang around in church. I received an email this week, a couple of days ago. I'd like to read this email, and I'd be curious to know how you'd respond. In fact, if you'd like to put it in the comments below, I'd like to read your response. And just to be clear, I've changed a few of the details. I asked for permission, by the way, to do this video and to read this email. And also, I have changed a few of the details to protect the guilty. Mr. Hunt, I've been a subscriber of your teaching material for several years now. It has been a wonderful, beneficial thing in growing as a communicator and a teacher of God's Word. Thank you. I have run into a problem in the class where I am a teacher, and I am asking you if you have some advice or material to help me through this. We have a married couple who has a couple of semesters of seminary under their belt, and they love Jesus and they love the local church. And I might just mention in passing that one thing the writer here has in his favor is, in spite of the fact that he's going to go on to explain that this person is a difficult person for him, you notice he has a bit of a positive attitude toward them. And that's a real key thing, and that's a good thing in this case. And sometimes difficult people, we can get kind of a difficult attitude toward them, and it just makes the situation worse. But in this case, he freely recognizes that they love Jesus and they love the local church. They want to teach people. They want to help people. The problem is he comes across as a total jerk. Can you imagine? A total jerk, and very aggressive at times. At any time, others see things different than him. It is a rough road, not only in our adult class, but in other classes that he is in. We have had several comments, and some leave because they do not like his combativeness. Last Sunday was the last part of, and he states the series that they are in, and that class was especially rough with them. Two of our members actually got up and left. I would appreciate your advice. Do you have a training video on this? And as I say, here's the training video for feeble thoughts that I might have along these lines. First thing I'd like to talk to you about is the importance and the commonness of this problem. As I say, it seems to me that church world, we have an above average cross-section of difficult people. And it is a very, very important issue. I remember being in a class years ago in a First Baptist Church, Las Cruces, where I was a member there for many years. And it's a wonderful class. Had a wonderful teacher. He's actually in the ministry now. I've run across him a time or two on the road. He was a great guy. He was a great teacher of that class, and the group was great. There was only one thing that was not great. There was one guy in the class, and he single-handedly ruined the class. And I remember sitting and thinking as every week the teacher would try to lead in a discussion, and this gentleman would always answer every question and would answer for a long time and would kind of steal the show, and it was just kind of hard to get along with. And I remember thinking at that time, I thought, you know what? This guy is single-handling all of the work. Say this teacher is spending 5 hours preparing for this lesson. All of that is down the drain. And he's going to single-handedly kill this class. And I thought about that old phrase from Star Trek that goes, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And it occurred to me that if it just came right down to it and you had no other choice other than you had to run this guy off for the benefit of the group, I think it would be worth it. I think it is just that is important. Sadly, this is a common problem, but I'm telling you, it is a very, very important problem that we must deal with. And it will kill the growth and life and discipleship and the joy of any group if we do not deal with it. Now, we hope it doesn't come to that. We hope we don't have to run anybody off. But just want to say that to set up the point that this is a very, very, very important issue to deal with. Two of the things, kind of assumptions that on my part, but I want to just mention them in passing. And one is that you engage in some serious prayer about this matter. You pray about your own attitude. As I commented as I read your email, it seemed like you got a really pretty good attitude, and I commend you for that. But I would encourage you to pray deeply about this, and then talk to your pastor or your small group pastor, whatever you call what we used to call a minister of education in church world, sometimes called a discipleship pastor pastor or a small group pastor these days. But I would, in the abundance of counsel, there is wisdom, and there's a limited amount of insight. I feel like I can provide kind of a generic insight into this somewhat common problem. And you have a specific situation. I would encourage you to talk to your pastor and local people there. Be careful not to gossip, but we want to talk to your local pastor, your local minister of education or small group pastor about that. Another thing that you might do, and truthfully, I'm not sure if this particular one is going to help in this case. I think it might have helped in the case of the story that I just told you about. And I think almost every class would do well to start every group saying, let's review what we would like to happen in this class. We want this to be a place where everyone participates, but no one dominates. Would y'all all say that with me? We want this to be a place where, let's say it together, everyone participates, no one dominates. Let's say it again. We want this to be a place where everyone participates. Jim, we want to hear from you. Jill, we want to hear from you. Barbara, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from everyone, but we want no one to dominate this conversation. And the teacher, by the way, might be the exception to that. That is, the teacher comes prepared and ought to talk more than everybody else. In that sense, ought to dominate the conversation. But we want everyone to participate, and we want no one to dominate. And you could do well to start every class. And I say, in this particular case, it seems like the problem is not so much that they're dominating the conversation as so much as their combativeness in that conversation. But I still think it's a good idea that for many classes we start that way. We want everyone to participate and no one to dominate. And if it's still a problem, you might end the class by saying, all right, class, let's do a little evaluation. Say it with a big smile on your face and say, did we have everyone participate? Jill, I don't think we heard from you today. We'd love to hear from you. Did it look to you like anybody dominated? Jim, you really participated a lot today. And Jim, I would encourage you, let somebody else have a turn next time. We want everyone to be like you. We want everyone to participate like you participate. In order for everyone else to participate, we might need you to hold back just a little bit. If you could help us with that, you might start with that. But in this particular case, because people are leaving, it looks like this is time for a Matthew 18 conversation. And I would encourage you to read over that passage carefully. You might look at some commentaries and studies about that. Do a little study about that. I'm not going to have time to get into it in great depth here. But the idea here is you go to this person alone. You go to this person in love. That is your sincere desire, is that you want to help them. And let me be real clear about this. This is a person that's going into ministry. This habit is going to ruin their ministry. It is going to ruin their effectiveness in ministry, and it is going to harm many, many, many churches if not dealt with. And so it is an important stewardship that God has given you, that you would deal with this situation and deal with it in love and deal with it prayerfully, but deal with this situation. Go to them. Matthew 18 teaches if your brother sins against you, and the idea is singular there. If he sins one time, if he sins a particular time, go to him with one sin. In other words, we don't want to go to him and say, you're just a jerk all the time. We want to say to him, listen, Sunday, when you said this, there was this result. I've got a guy in one class, I'll keep it real generic here, but one class I was in one time, and he's often complaining about how his family does not treat him as well as he would like them to be to treat him. And for a long time I said, boy, that's sure sad. I'm sure sorry they don't treat you as well as you'd like to be treated. But then one time recently he was telling a story, and somebody in his family came to him and they had a little interaction, and he said, I told them this, that, and the other, that, and the other. And I turned to him and I said, I'm going to call him Bob. His name's not Bob, but I'm going to call him Bob. And I said, Bob, if you said that to me, you would really hurt my feelings. And he looked totally shocked, like, are you suggesting that I did something wrong here? And he said, what do you mean? I said, Bob, what I mean is, if you said that to me, it would really hurt my feelings, and I would never want to be with you again. And I'm starting to understand why some of your family members do not want to be with you, because you've hurt their feelings. I guarantee you, when you said that to them, you hurt their feelings. And this was completely new information to them. And I believe it is time to go out to lunch, to pull them aside and say, Bob, when you said this last week, one sin at a time, not you're overall a jerk, but this, when you did this week, it really hurt so-and-so's feelings. It would have hurt my feelings. And see what kind of response we can get. And you may not get them to repent right then and say, start crying and get all emotional and stuff, but I believe it is going to make an impression on their life. And then, of course, Matthew 18 teaches that if the situation doesn't get better, that you would take 2 or 3 people with you and say, listen, this has happened, and it really is a big problem. And that we would confront them in love. So I think the time has come for a Matthew 18 confrontation in love, privately, one sin at a time, and to deal with this and to deal with this forthrightly. But before I go, I'd like to talk to you about kind of a long-term strategy in dealing with these kind of things. My first pastor talked to me a lot about this, and I saw him model this a lot. And that is, in nearly every message he taught, he often taught that the cross of Christ compels us to get along with one another. That one of the most important and difficult things that we will ever do is to learn to get along with one another. Jesus said, by this all men will know that you are my disciples, by your love for one another. They're going to see that you're such a loving, gracious, kind, good, getting along kind of people, that it's going to draw people to yourself because you get along. And I think we ought to teach on this often, that the cross of Christ compels us to bear with one another, to forgive with one another. And here's a verse that I think your friend in this case might need to hear and hear over and over again. Let your gentleness be evident to all. I remember sitting down with my son many times over the years when he first started dating that woman, Annie, who is now his wife. And he is kind of young and stupid like a lot of us were at an earlier stage in his life, and he's got to be a very good husband. But at one point in his life, he'd say some kind of smart aleck to her, and I could tell she just kind of wilted her feelings. And I said to Dustin, let your gentleness be evident to all. And it got to be almost kind of a little joke. And I would encourage you to say this so often that your people, when somebody in the class gets a little bit snitty, that somebody will speak up and say, oh yeah, I know what you've taught us, teacher. Let your gentleness be evident to all. It's one of the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. I think I always get those in a little bit of a wrong order, but I think that is the right 9. And one of my favorite verses, Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turns away wrath. And I would encourage you to teach on those things often. I love what Bill Hybels says, that we can teach our way out of almost any situation. And I would encourage you to deal with this situation today, but then as a long-term strategy to teach people continually about the importance of loving one another and the importance of let your gentleness be evident to all.